Lots of exciting updates on the car. It's making some really good progress now. We've got all 3 radiators mounted up, as well as the waterfall duct off the top of the roof into the trunk area. And back there we have a water radiator for the engine. We have transmission and engine oil coolers, as well as an intercooler heat exchanger. We ordered the pieces that we knew would fit within kind of the body or the chassis of the car, and then it was my job to then figure out how are they actually going to get mounted, how are we going to get air to the radiators. I always start with a sketch pad of some kind. I'm usually doodling a little bit, and then it's usually some temporary prototypes to kind of mock things up in place. And once I can kind of float the radiators where I want them to be, I can fill in all the other spaces. As parts show up, we're fitting them and changing them around. Next up on deck, OP is building a firewall and transmission tunnel. When you take one of the biggest diesel engines and put it in a small Nissan GTR, you have to cut a massive hole. But with where the engine's sitting now, and as Cole mentioned, we have the final location of the engine, we're left with this hole that we have to separate from the driver. We don't want coal to be exposed directly to the transmission of the engine, so it's my job to enclose all that back in. There's been some crazy restraints with the space. It's been very, very tight, but with the new engine location, it's definitely making my life a lot easier. It's gonna be better for the driver, it's gonna be better for the engine. We wanna make this thing easy to work on, and so everything I'm designing is removable. That way, if we have to get to the transmission or the turbos or anything, it's going to be a lot easier because, again, we're designing it to be easy to work on. I've got enough room over here now for a pedal, so I'm happy with that. Like the way I transition some of the sheet metal over to the tunnel is going to be a little interesting. When I go about the design process of kind of designing some of these metal pieces, metal is pretty easy to work with, but with tooling and everything, it's so much easier if I can rapidly prototype with something else. And so I love to use cardboard for just kind of getting a really rough idea of kind of what's physically possible. Because again, I can bend the cardboard, I can kind of stretch it, I can mount it to different locations because essentially it's going to act the same way the metal would in a flat sense. And so if I can make the cardboard work, then of course I can make the real life metal piece fit just fine. So I love to prototype with something that's easier to work with. If I can use scissors instead of a shear or something, like it's way better. So the first version of the engine mounts were based around a wet sump oiling system and a possible front-mounted turbo. And some things have changed a little bit, and we're going to be able to run a dry sump oiling system and a top-mounted factory-style turbo. So in doing that, we had to move the engine forward a little bit and up about 1/4 of an inch. As we were finalizing the engine location, we really wanted to make sure that the chassis is up to the task of supporting all of the torque and power that this diesel engine is going to make. We're going to be making a ton of torque, and the one thing that a torquey engine wants to do in a car is rip itself out of the car. And so everything that we design moving forward to mount the engine has to be robust, because if we don't pay enough attention there, the engine's just going to want to jump right out of the hood. Parts, diesel parts, they're diesel parts. Go real fast using diesel parts.
there's material shortages, there's part shortages on everything around the world, so we're not immune to that. So whether it's delays on getting the rear differential in, custom drive shaft made, wiring, things like that, everything seems to take a little bit longer. So we're doing all the big parts that we can with what we have today while we wait for some of these other major components to show up. Judson, I just need to worry about one thing. This is it. Full throttle, whole run. Mark my words. See me at the top.
So what else do you want to say?
Judson, you didn't ask where I got this sick t-shirt.
Tell them where you
Go to LYFE Motorsport.